Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
My friends, what does a fallen state, not like a national government, but I mean a state within the U.S., what does a fallen state look like? Because I think it happens to look a whole lot like what is happening in the state of Minnesota. And I've got family up there. I care about them a lot. Of course, this is our nation as well. But my, oh my, the state of Minnesota is, just teetering on the edge here. Absolute chaos. We had another shooting over the weekend, ICE shooting. An individual has died. And of course, we have the standard reaction by politicians like Jacob Fry, Tim Walz. They are throwing all of the coals that they can, the gasoline on this fire. And I want to talk about this today, my friends. I want to talk about this. It's a lot. And on top of that, there's another development that I think is absolutely relevant to this conversation as well. Cam Higbee has said that he has basically infiltrated a Signal group in Minnesota. Signal is kind of a private messaging app. And he was able to get in there somehow and is telling people the MO, the procedures, the way that these radicals operate, what they're doing. This has to be a funded mechanism. It's structured, and they're basically colluding, coordinating, conspiring to, of course, keep ICE from doing its job. And that's because, again, what is at stake here? It is votes. It is the exposure of fraud. It is the entire apparatus that the left has been building, that the lovers of big government have been building for decades. It is about to collapse. It really is. Now, we'll see what happens. I don't know. Listen, this story is still being written in real time here. I'm not sure where this is going to end up, but that's what we want to talk about here today. I welcome you to the program. Hope you had a good weekend. If you're like me, you might be digging out from some snow. I don't know how much we've gotten here. It's probably around 10 inches. Is that fair? We don't know. We don't know really what we got. It's a lot of blowing and drifting. Cold weather, lots of snow. Not as much as some people probably got, but I don't know, probably in the 10, maybe foot range. It's just hard to tell. It's a light powder. It's not like the wet snows that we often get here. But anyway, we're doing just fine and getting back at it here today on this Monday, the last week of January, which is just time flies. I'm telling you, if you're younger, heed these words. Time flies. Make the most out of every day, every hour, every minute that you possibly can, my friends. Let's be honest, though, when your financial world starts getting a little more complicated, you need more than one size fits all advice. That's where Full Suite Wealth shines the brightest. Their team specializes in working with families and individuals at your level, offering personalized guidance that goes far beyond the basics, from private equity and private credit to option strategies and coordinated legal planning. Full Suite Wealth helps you see the big picture and make confident decisions about your legacy. It's about having a dedicated team guide you each and every step of the way so you can focus on what matters most: your family, your goals, your future, your dreams. You want real confidence in your financial life? Visit fullsuitewealth.com. That's full sweetwealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future, my friends. Let's recap what happened in Minnesota over the weekend. There was a shooting on Saturday that involved federal immigration officials. Victim has been identified as a nurse. This is, of course, the second federal involved deadly incident in Minnesota yet this month. There's video evidence that's out there that's circulating. And of course, there's an immediate narrative or even a conflict in the narrative regarding the shooting. The federal government, which of course here DHS led by Kristi Noem, comes out and says that this officer, this ICE agent, was responding to a threat and acting in self-defense. Video evidence out there raises questions about really what was happening. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. And again, anytime something like this happens, I have to remind you, and I know you know this, but I just have to, being someone who speaks about these things publicly, I have to just state the obvious elephant in the room here, which is you're given the equivalent of 0.3 seconds to make your decision as to which side of this issue you fall on. And so, of course, you got the side that loves lawlessness and chaos, the side that's trying to defend people who are here illegally. You have the side of law enforcement who's trying to enforce law that's been on the book for a long, long time, but has not been enforced because of, well, political priorities and weakness and everything else that's been plaguing our nation's politicians for a long time. And so you're basically given immediately you have to say, hey, here's what we got. Here's our choices. Let's run with it. This is who's involved. ICE shoots and kills a man. So you have to just, obviously choose a side immediately. And it's much more complicated than that. In fact, if you watch the video evidence, it's interesting to me. The video evidence that exists, it at least causes us to have questions. What happened? Why did he get shot? But see, I want to back up, and I don't know. Well, I do know why, but it just seems, I don't know why more people don't just demand transparency in the discussion of this, because everyone wants to know why he got shot, and of course I do as well, but I also want to know how we got to that point to begin with. And so let's say that you're on the side of the left. Let's say that you're on the side of the people who are coordinating operations, trying to stop ICE. First of all, you're breaking the law. If you're trying to impede with a federal operation of ICE, you are breaking the law, full stop. This is not complicated. You're not allowed to do that. You can protest it. You can say how disgusted you are by it. You can say bad things about the agents. You can try to persuade people to agree with you. You can say and do those sorts of things, but you're not allowed to interfere with an ICE operation. So let's say ICE is out here doing their job. By the way, as I'm talking about this, I don't know if you've seen the story. ICE just released, ICE just released a report showing that there was an incident, recently in Minnesota, of course, where an ICE agent had apprehended an individual, and that individual bit, allegedly, the ICE agent's finger off, at least the tip of it. I read in the article that the officer is going to lose the finger. I don't know if it's the full finger, part of the finger, but this is the sort of stuff that's happening. And how do we get to this point? Again, protest is protest. You can air your grievances. You can complain, you can have your signs, you can have your chants, you can have your communications over Signal. But when those communications cross the line from pure protest into an operation where they are calling for effectively active interference with lawful operations of ICE, you've gone into an obstruct. You're breaking the law. You're obstructing the law. And so that's where we are. That's where we are in this particular situation. And on a case-by-case basis, that's the starting point. The starting point oftentimes is you're seeing people impede ICE's movements. And so let's intertwine what's happening allegedly on this Signal app. Whether or not Higbee's report is accurate, I'm not suggesting it's not, but just whether or not the details of that are correct or not, we know that there's communication, right? We know that there's communication and conspiracy and collusion between the people who are trying to impede ICE. They're working together. They have a strategy. They're communicating somehow, probably over apps like Signal. And so they're organizing. They've got their whistles. They're blowing the whistles. They're blocking the streets. The blocking of the streets, that's not a lawful activity. You cannot do that, especially when you're impeding traffic intentionally, particularly traffic of ICE agents trying to conduct their job. And so that's the starting point oftentimes in these videos is right there, right? You have people that are blocking ICE, trying to prevent them, not just blowing the whistles from the sidewalk, not just screaming things and, those sorts of things. What they're doing is impeding the activity. So you've immediately got cause for, you've got an argument for arrest immediately because you're not allowed to do that. Now, ICE it's interesting. ICE is a law enforcement agency. Now, that's one of the things that people on the left do not want to cede or admit. They don't want to say that ICE is law enforcement. It absolutely is. It's tasked with a particular part of the law. But if ICE is out doing its operations and another crime happens in their presence, they can do something about that as well. It depends. Again, this can get complicated at some level, but in general, they are sworn officers who can, if they see a crime committed in their presence, they can do something about it. And so they have the ability to arrest people. And so they're out there trying to do their job, specifically to find people who are not here legally, especially those who are violent and who have done very heinous things or who are involved in drugs or gang activity or whatever. Doesn't just have to be that, by the way, but that's who they're starting with. That's who they're targeting. And you have people out there interfering. So then you have people who are interfering and it becomes physical because they are trying to physically impede ICE. ICE is not going to allow that. And so suddenly you have a physical confrontation. And that's kind of where a lot of these videos that you've seen with this tragic shooting, which again is tragic. It's terrible that this happened. And so there's a physical altercation. This man is taken to the ground. There's all this talk about what he had in his hand, and people have concluded that he has a cell phone. And it's either a cell phone or a gun. But see, that's not the full story. Just because he was not holding the gun in the street doesn't mean that that's the only time he could have accessed the firearm. Once he was physically apprehended and they saw him with a gun, even a gun that he has the right to legally carry, which, as I understand it, he did, even though he's a person on the left. I believe he had a license to carry this firearm. ICE agents have him and he's resisting, or there's something happening. He's not just rolling over, and it didn't appear to me anyway, and just and offering himself up and saying, here, just put me in cuffs. I'm going to cooperate. But you have someone who's armed and who's resisting. We don't know. We don't know if he made a movement for that firearm. I can't tell from those videos. I'm not accusing him of doing it. I'm just saying it changes the dynamic very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. You've got an armed man who's now resisting you, multiple officers, and during this scuffle, during this physical altercation, you hear someone yell gun, and then a firearm is just discharged, and then multiple rounds are fired, leaving this individual dead in the streets of Minneapolis. And we're supposed to make an immediate judgment on that. I've reserved judgment. I do this regularly. I've reserved judgment. I think in theory, whatever this, again, specific case goes to show us, number one, if you are being apprehended by law enforcement, you should immediately cooperate. You should immediately cooperate. Having this turn into a physical altercation is not a good idea. It's a terrible idea. Even if you're in the right, you're better off complying and then fighting it from a legal perspective another day. And this even goes to people who are acting against the law here, people who are trying to object to, at least, or impede at worst, ICE's lawful authority. You're better off simply cooperating here, number one. Number two, if a person is armed and they are resisting or fighting, or there's some sort of a scuffle, that certainly changes the calculus of the situation. Now officers are acutely aware of the immediacy of a threat with a person with a firearm. Again, why did you put yourself in a position where there's a physical altercation to begin with, and you're armed? Again, nothing wrong with being armed. The part here that's the problem is that this escalates to a physical altercation. That's the part that this is an immediate problem. So you've got the struggle. You don't know. We don't know what happened. I mean, maybe there's going to be body cam footage. I don't know. That's released here. But you have a scuffle with an armed man, and the next thing you know, he's fired upon by law enforcement. Doesn't mean that that's justified at this point. But listen, again, resisting and fighting with them, and then you're armed. Immediately my mind goes to, this changes the rules of what's happening here. This change, maybe not the rules, but this escalates it up that list of things that can happen, while at the same time recognizing that this is completely and utterly tragic. And so you've got competing narratives. You've got this entire question. There's questions surrounding this entire thing. The city or the state, maybe both, have sued or basically said, hey, we want to make sure that the federal government doesn't destroy the evidence, which is a pretty big implication here, that Trump and his team are trying to bury evidence that could be could implicate potentially. I'm not suggesting it will, but that's where we've gotten to. We've gotten to this point where the rhetoric has reached a fevered pitch. And as I said off the top, what does a fallen state look like? And it's an interesting question. I mean, I studied this stuff in school. Just not that that's of any real value. I've heard the arguments. Here's the point. I've heard the arguments from the extreme radical left people. And when you talk about these in an academic environment, these things, sometimes the lines, you can talk about a fallen state, but what does that really look like? And as experience comes along, and as culture has devolved into, chaos in some places, absolute absence of morality, truth, right and wrong. You have people who are electing politicians who actively lie to them, who peddle narratives that are not rooted in reality. And you have people who have just totally abandoned any sort of moral law whatsoever. People who have abandoned the U.S. Code altogether, the Constitution altogether. I mean, it's a mess. But you think, what does an actual fallen state look like? Because it's got to be close to what we're witnessing happening in Minneapolis. And now on top of that, we've got Governor Walz, who's compared ICE enforcement to Nazi occupation, including specifically the story of Anne Frank. Now, I read, and many of you have probably read too, The Diary of Anne Frank. We read that, I want to say, in high school. Did we read that in high school, Oz? Maybe parts of it. We talked about it. But there's a young Jewish girl who is, where was Anne Frank? Sorry, Oz was not ready for that question. But she's in a German-occupied area. They're coming through. They're actively looking for Jewish children, families. They're being hidden, right? They're hidden in secret rooms and so forth. And she's writing her diary. It is, German. I didn't know if it was one of the occupied areas, but she's in Germany. She's targeted. Her family, everybody like her. This is what the Nazis did. That's who they were. The Jewish people were blamed for everything. And so she's targeted. They hide her. They eventually find her. And then, of course, we all know what happens with concentration camps and everything else. And so this is what Tim Walz is comparing. That story, the Diary of Anne Frank, with the with what's happening with ICE agents looking for people who are in this country illegally, who are being deported, who've overstayed. They're still here, right? At any moment, by the way, if you're here illegally, you are free to leave. In fact, we've had 1.9 million estimated people who did that in 2025, but yet they're still here today, and ICE can legally deport them. Walz is saying that this is like Anne Frank. It's sickening, really. It's sickening. And now this is what this did. This turns up the volume on this situation. Now I've got to take a break. But friends, are you spending your hard-earned money with businesses that turn around and support these leftist causes, these leftist politicians like Tim Walz, like Jacob Fry? Well, that's exactly why we created Freedom Marketplace. It's a free searchable directory of businesses that share your conservative principles, your values. These are businesses that have vowed not to support these leftist lunatics and their leftist causes. And there's no login required. You can create an account, but you don't have to. You can just go and look at the directory. No strings attached, just good, patriotic businesses pushing in the same direction you are. Check it out today, freedommarketplace.net. That's freedommarketplace.net. Liberty and business for all. Time out for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. You know, we're at a place, and I've said this before. I stand by this. I'll say this again. We are at a place where we simply have to win. We have to win. We have to win this politically. We have to win this this battle that we're fighting. This has been something that's been in the works for a long time. Now you could say, well, gee whiz, this what's happening, Todd, is something that's been the result of what's Trump's reelection, his deployment of ICE to a particular city where people are standing up for the residents of their city, or whatever narrative that's out there. But the truth is that it's taken us a long, long time to get here. A long, long time to get here, because you have to re-educate people. You have to get people to be open to some of these morally bankrupt and absolutely godless ideologies. And that's what we have here. This has been a long, long process. Drip, drip, drip process. I go back in my memory bank to, when would this have been? I think this was my last semester, at Butler University, 26 years ago, which is also hard to believe. I remember I took a class. I've shared this before. Took a class, had 8 students, a 300 level class. Is capitalism really better? That was the name of the program. The professor was an individual who had lived in the Soviet Union. I'm pausing because I think he lived there. He may have just honeymooned there, but he was there, and he was very, very sympathetic, at minimum, to the communist cause. And so that was the course, which it was designed to at least cause us to question, which at some degree, at some point is not a big deal. I believe in education. I believe in, when I say education, I don't necessarily mean formal education. I believe in being aware of the reasons I believe what I believe. I also believe in understanding what we're up against. It's one of the things I learned more than anything in my time in college was understanding what I was up against, what we as a nation are now up against. But I remember at the end of that course, I remember, again, 4 guys, 4 girls, and I remember the question, the discussion, as we got to the end of that semester. Let's take a vote. What they said, let's take a vote. Let's see if we think capitalism or communism is better. I kid you not. This is true story. And the vote was tied. It was actually tied. I was blown away. I was actually just, I don't want to say shocked, but I was pretty surprised that someone could argue for communism, but they did. And what was even more interesting to me was that the 4 guys in the class voted for capitalism. The 4 girls in the class, it was broken down 50-50, 4 guys, 4 girls. The 4 girls voted for communism. And then you think about the impact, and I guess, listen, I know that there are some women out there who are hearing my voice who are the most, educated, well-versed, staunch defenders of the Constitution and capitalism. This is just how it panned out. It's too small to say that it's anything more than just a tiny, tiny, tiny sample size. It's not, statistically, we don't know enough from 8 votes. But I will tell you this, it does raise into question the next part of this, which is the impacts that feminism had, that modern feminism has had on the thinking of our American women. American women are more inclined statistically to be Democrat voters, especially if they are quote unquote more educated, which that's designed to make people feel like the smart ones are Democrats as well. Listen, some of the biggest idiots I've ever dealt with had letters tacked on to the end of their name, PhD and everything else. Just because you have those things doesn't make you more intelligent. Intelligence has nothing to do with someone's formal education. There are lots of ways people can become intelligent. There's a lot of different types of intelligence. In fact, the people, it's interesting. I think that we like to think the type of intelligent we are is the best type. If we don't have a lot of schooling, we might say, well, I'm common sense intelligent. I don't have a lot of book smarts, but that's what matters. Or if you go to the university and that's what you know, you might say, look, all the smart people go here and do this and that. When in reality, it's much more complicated than that. But the truth is that there's been a nonstop, relentless assault on American values, on truth, on morality. These things have been torn apart piece by piece over the course of time to where we now have a group of people that are prepared to openly support politicians who are in open defiance against the Constitution and federal law. We have to win this fight. We have to win it. It's not going away. I take us back 10 years now, 10 years ago to 2016. I remember distinctly. I remember talking on this program about the problems we faced as a nation, the intensity that we had politically. I remember these things. I talked about them in great detail. And I remember hearing people say, oh, I can't wait until after November 8th or whatever it was, 2016, so that so that we can get back to business as usual. We can get back from the intensity back to normal and not living in this moment of high intensity between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I remember people saying this, and I said at the time, you have made a major miscalculation here. The miscalculation is that you think that an election is going to end this. This is not going to end. This is not going to end. I don't mean necessarily what's happening in the streets of Minneapolis or Minnesota or other places around the country, though I certainly include that. But this battle is not going to end. We have to have the resolve. Our choices are simple. And listen, I know that this is not everybody's deal. This is, I would say, something I feel I am unwavering in this. I am not the least bit bothered. I'm bothered by the things that I see, but I'm not bothered with the concept that we're going to have to be in the metaphorical fight of our lives to save this country. I say bring it, because it's been a long time coming. It's been a long time coming, my friends. I know that some people don't have what it takes. I know, and I get it. I know some people just want to go back to the peace and calm. But here's the thing. The reason there was peace and calm was that our side was collectively, not everybody one-to-one, but collectively, we were apathetic. We were asleep at the wheel. We didn't see the danger that was happening behind the scenes or below the surface. We didn't know that those dots were getting connected. We didn't know that because of those things that were done outside of the view of the mainstream American public, we didn't realize that we were creating a monster, or not enough people did. You may have, I may have, but now America's chickens, as Jeremiah Wright would say, are coming home to roost, and this is exactly what we're dealing with. This is not going away. We have to win this one election at a time, but it's not just about elections. It's about controlling the 7 pillars of propaganda, which I talk about on this program as well, right? We let the left run academia. If you let the left run academia, the things that they're teaching the next generation of people that are going to be running for public office or hold positions of power or authority or whatever those folks are going to be the byproducts of the left who's creating the academics. You can go on down the line. People who control the media, people who control big tech, people who control science. My goodness, look at what happened just 6 years ago. COVID was 6 years ago, which is also kind of stunning. But 6 years ago with COVID, on down the list, my friends, through these pillars of propaganda, entertainment, the music that our kids sing, without having a filter, actually determining whether the things we're hearing should be accepted or whether they should be completely rejected, which is how we should handle, I think, most of pop culture's music and movies and so forth today. But too many people see that as the measuring stick. They don't even know that there's another measuring stick to use. They just use the one that's popularly reinforced by the culture, which is led by the lunatics on the left. Friends, there's a lot of confusion out there about kratom. You've heard the headlines, you've heard the stories. Most of those are based on synthetic junk that isn't real kratom at all. Real kratom is natural, it's tested, it's handled with care. No synthetics, no chemicals, no fillers, no shortcuts. That's exactly what you get from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. This is a trusted herbal option that's been used for generations, and it's a real alternative for people looking for something that doesn't come with a warning label that is a mile long. You can start with the Kratom Starter Pack. Use coupon code Todd Huff to get 10% off your first order. Visit Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Christopher's Organic Botanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. And yes, time out for me, my friends. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Your investments are like seeds that you plant, they grow, they multiply, but are they bearing the kind of fruit that you want them to bear? At 4-8 Financial, they believe your money should reflect your values. That's why they specialize in wealth management and what they call biblically responsible investing, so that they can screen out companies that don't align with your faith, with your values. This is all part of their purpose-centered financial planning, helping you live a life of meaning and purpose. If you want to see how your investments align with your values, to what degree they align with your values, just head on over to 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd to take a real quick and easy assessment. 4-8 Financial, my friends, they're here to worry about your money so you don't have to. All right, friends, again, we're in a fight for the survival of this republic, a fight for the survival of truth. This fight involves your children. This fight involves your grandchildren, your retirement, your business, your job, your church, your community, your tax dollars, how much we're going to allow fraud to exist. It's not just unique to Minnesota, although it appears that it is being abused in tremendous ways there. The amount of just ridiculousness happening with some of these programs and how money is being spent and how there's an absolute lack of oversight there. And we've got to stop, and I know different people respond differently. We've got to stop caring about offending people who do not have any sort of concern whatsoever about this, about our tax dollars being managed properly, about the rule of law being applied and consistently and fairly in accordance with that law. We can't worry about that. Too many people, I know it. I know these people, and they're good people. Good people can want good things, but then they think, when the situation gets intense or, just uncomfortable, we're too easy. Conservatives are notorious for this. Well, it's really none of our business. They can do what they want to do. Well, until they start burning it down. They can live their lives, I guess, however they want to live them. So long as it doesn't directly impact our lives, our government, our way of life, our values. But at some point, we have to stand up. And Reagan was right. I say this a lot. America, well, not just America, but freedom is always just one generation away from extinction. It's really a humbling thought to have. Freedom must be received and accepted by subsequent generations. You can't pass along liberty in the bloodstream. Just because we're born American doesn't mean that our children will accept American ideals, especially when they're being taught things that are antithetical to them in the public schools. Now, again, we've got some very good public school teachers out there. We've got some good school districts out there. But as I've said on this program before, and as I stand by it, let me tell you this. I would say that every school district in the country, there might be a couple on the fringe periphery where there's a tiny school somewhere in a remote part of the country that a leftist wouldn't dare set foot because they couldn't survive the harsh winters or something like that. But I would assume it to be the case that leftists have infiltrated every school in the country. I would assume that to be the case. Now, sometimes that means a rogue teacher here or there. Sometimes that means a school board member, an administrator. Sometimes that means someone who's running the PTO. I don't know specifically, but I do know that this is a problem nationwide, and that the way that the school is operating because of that person or because of the leftist running the show sets the stage. Or if we handle it the right way and we tell these folks when they throw their tantrums, we tell them no like adults. If we do that part correctly, that really starves the plant of this radical socialism or communism, this absolute chaos and morally bankrupt ideology and culture they're pushing upon us. We starve it out. We do not give in to this. We don't care that they act a fool, scream things in protest. We just don't care. We consider the source and we don't care. I have lunatics that have yelled things at me. I don't care. I'm sometimes highly entertained by this. People respond differently. but we have to realize that this is for the fight for the survival. This is the fight for the survival of this constitutional republic. And we must have a nation of laws, and those laws must be enforced. And we have got to win the battle in Minnesota. We've got to win the midterms this November. We've got to continue to fight against the culture. We have to watch. Wrong button there. We have to make sure, my friends, that we are engaging in the culture and entertainment and science and academia and regaining control, taking back control from the radical lunatics that have been running the show in those particular areas, the 7 pillars of propaganda, as I call it. And we've got to systematically, brick by brick, step by step, regain control here, my friends. We can do it. I got to run. SDG.